off.
Yes, I've got all that, yeah. Cool. Can we turn the music off? Yeah, please. Hello. Hello, good evening. You can all hear me, yes? Great, what an amazing turnout. This is incredible. My name is Nicholas Cooper. I live in the locality. I've been here for 8 years now. I run my own land-based business on the Pembrokeshire-Carmarthenshire border. I've been looking into 5G for about a year now. And nobody seems to be listening to my concerns. And then I was put in touch with 2 people in this village here in Dogmaels. And we started meeting. Probably in November, every Friday night, we'd sit and chat about things and thinking what we can do. And the one thing that we realised we need to do and can do is raise awareness on the subject of 5G. It's a huge subject, but one of the fruitions of our meetings is this here right now. And it was Suzanne's idea to give Ian a call for him to come down and share the knowledge he has and his connections. So here we are, amazing. Housework. First we will see the fire exits there. Boot squatter, fire exit, and a fire exit at the far end where Josh is standing, and the rear door. No smoking in here at all, and can everybody please, please, please ensure your phones are switched off. Has anybody parked in the extra parking here?
Can't find it. Can't find it.
Can't find it, well, I've just been informed that the gates are going to be locked at 10:30. So maybe at the break time you could rush across and get your car out of there if you wanted to stay right till the very end.
Where's this?
It's back further out towards Cardigan, near the Fiat garage. Yeah. You've obviously found the refreshments here, and the toilets on the far side down there. And we have Peter Gain at the back, who's got a stall, give us a wave, there we are, a stall on electrosensitivity. The format for the evening, Ian will start to talk after me, and then we'll have a 20-minute break around 8:30, reconvene at 8:50, where Ian will give some more information, and that will flow into question and answers. And please, 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 can we keep the questions on topic? We don't want to talk about Brexit today. So some thank yous, some quick thank yous. Thank you to Suzanne, Anne, Vicky, Zoshi. There's a few others working behind the scenes there for us. Thank you to the Eco Shop for their support, and to Clive, I think he's gone now, Clive the Soundman, and Anna for lending me the VCR there. So, without further ado, it's a great honour for me to introduce Ian, because I've been following his work now for 10 years. So, it's been quite a journey over the last 10 years, so we're still on it. Now, I'll pass you over to Ian. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. Well, what an amazing turnout. Can I just ask, does everybody actually know why you're here? The reason I asked that is because a few years ago, 2014, I was asked to do a series of talks on fracking in North Yorkshire, and the bulk of the venues were in villages. And there was a lady who was sitting in the front row who after about 15 minutes said, "What's this talk about?" And then I realised that, you see, what happens in North Yorkshire is people go, "Oh, there's something on in the village hall. I'll be there. What is it?" So anyway, it's great that everybody knows why you're here, and I know that some people have travelled quite some distance to be here tonight, so thanks for making the effort, and you know, what a wonderful turnout. I gather it's well over 100 already. Now, let me just make the observation that I don't necessarily expect everybody to agree with everything I share tonight, but that's okay. Because I'm not necessarily trying to convince you of anything. What I'm actually trying to do is to stimulate your own curiosity. Because the crucial element of fighting something like 5G, and you'll see as we go through the evening why it is I think that you know, we need to take a stand on this, is because you know, this is something that is potentially an existential threat. And that may sound like a really, you know, outrageous, sweeping statement, and frankly, it's meant to. Because what I hope by the evening, end of the evening, is that, you know, you don't necessarily go straight home and get on the internet and then suddenly find it 6 o'clock in the morning. But sometime, you know, as the content of tonight sort of sinks in, that you actually then take a deeper look at what's occurring here. Because, you know, the downside of this is we don't have long. And I'm going to, at the end of the evening, you know, propose some solutions as to how we can challenge this. And many of the solutions that I propose will be based upon our experience of fighting fracking, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, is effectively outlawed here in the Principality. Very creative method of making sure that fracking never can take place in Wales. And the same approach has been adopted in Scotland and Northern Ireland, which is to effectively make the planning regulations so tight with regard to environmental protection that it's just not possible to even kick it off. And some of the ways in which that's been achieved, I think, you know, were great nursery lessons in terms of what we need to be doing here. So before I get underway, let me just ask a question. And I'll explain the reason. Please don't take any offence. But how many people here are entitled to a senior rail card? That's probably, what, a good 50% of the audience. Now that is good. You know, it is unfortunate that whenever we have events like this, there is a predominance of people that, shall I say, the right side of 50 plus. But that's not insignificant, because as you will see later on in the evening, the retirees are an extremely powerful community force. Not least because the current generation of retirees, and obviously I'm generalising, but it may well be the last generation of retirees that actually are able to retire and have a degree of financial independence. But of course the big difference about retirees, everybody else, is that they have time. And within the anti-fracking community, we have a particular group in East Yorkshire who have been very, very successful in preventing the East Yorkshire wolds from being fracked, and they call themselves the Jerry Activists. And they range in age from about 70 right through to I think about 85. One's a former NASA engineer, one's the former chair of Hull City Council, one's the former director of Children's Services and Education for Hull Council. And you know, these are all people who have served in the community, held positions within the community, and you know, consequently they do carry some sway with the local authority. So the retirees are very, very important to everything that's going to unfold. So, without further ado, 5G. Why is 5G a problem? Well, back in my very, very early career, I actually worked in military telecommunications, very briefly for a few years, with a company called Redifone. no longer exists. But at the time, in the early to mid-70s, we were producing military and marine radio communications equipment. And I have a few scars as a result of RF burns. Fortunately, no more than that. But because of my very early career looking at or working with telecoms, I'm very well aware of the risks associated with radio frequency and electromagnetic fields. And then a few years ago, I actually discovered that I have unfortunately developed a relatively minor electrosensitivity. But that's one of the reasons why I choose to live in a field, in a caravan. Because when I'm in a town or a city, I don't sleep particularly well, and that's primarily because of the bombardment of the Wi-Fi. Once I'm back in the field, where there's still some element of RF, but it's not so intense. So, obviously over the last few years or decades so, I've been following the reports of damage, particularly to children and youths, and looking at also the implications on the military as our military becomes more and more based around technology. And now that we have 30-odd years of evidence of this rollout of mobile technology, and we've moved from 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, and whilst the level of sensitivity does exist, for sure, no question, and there's no question that people have suffered, in some cases, quite severely, because the radio frequencies are carcinogenic, so it can trigger cancer. But it's been, if you like, what the corporatocracy calls collateral. In other words, the fact that a few people can't tolerate the radio frequencies is neither here nor there, really. In the wider scheme of things. And as you'll see during the course of the presentation, the attitude of those who are behind this is, we don't really care about the negative health impacts, because this is all about commerce. And sadly, and I can speak from personal experience, when you challenge the corporations in the courts, you very quickly learn that health, safety and well-being of the population is very much secondary to commerce. So, the corporations have the, if you like, the dominion, and what you'll see tonight is the effort that they put in to basically making sure that they can dismiss any challenges. And of course they use weaponized vocabulary. So, the obvious one is conspiracy theory. It's a weaponized term that's literally meant to shut down discussion. So I'm going to start the evening with talking about an event that occurred. See if we can get this working. Sorry, I made a point of getting here really early so that we could get all the technology sorted. I think he's been sitting too long, that's all. Right, let's try this again. There we go. So I know it's going to be really difficult to read this from the back, so I will read it and share with you. So this is a report on an event that occurred 12 years ago now in a community not a million miles away from here, Bridgend. And this was the spate of youth suicides in Bridgend, which occurred in between 2007 and 2008. Now I know there are reports that there are still problems regarding self-harming and suicide in the Bridgend area, but from what I can see, it's roughly the same level as we're starting to see everywhere else. And as you'll see, we are starting to see an increase in this. But Bridgend stood out because, it was actually acknowledged at the time there was something in the region of about 24, 25 suicides within the space of 12 months. And there was never any official investigation. But there were two independent studies which carried no sway with regard to the establishment because they were independent. And one was carried out by a guy called Barry Trower, who is a former naval communications specialist and actually has dedicated the last 20 odd years of his life to trying to raise awareness of the concerns associated with exposure to electromagnetic fields and in particular radio frequencies. And Barry went to Bridgend and he ascertained that every one of these youths lived within 80 metres of a phone mast. Now here was obviously, that was his specialist area, so obviously he was looking to perhaps see if there was any link with this. So he made no more observation than that they were all living within 80 metres, which he considered to be close. The second study was by a medical practitioner that was becoming extremely concerned with the way drugs like Ritalin are being handed out to our youth. And Ritalin is a drug that is the sort of go-to medication by many GPs for dealing with children with ADHD, attention deficiency, and hyperactivity. And this practitioner made the observation that every one of the teen suicides was either on or had recently come off of a course of Ritalin. So consider the possibility that it may have actually been a combination of the two. You know, so this is the law of unintended consequences, where you're dealing with one thing, but actually there's other factors that come into play. But one of the reasons that, or maybe the primary reason that there was no investigation, was because if there's no investigation, then there's nothing to acknowledge. Whereas if there's a report that's published and you don't like the findings, then obviously you have to then, establish another study or put together a committee to rebut the findings. But if there's no report in the first instance, then it didn't happen. And that's the attitude. So as far as the establishment's concerned, Bridgend, no, we don't know, and we're not going to waste any time or money trying to find out. And another situation, very different but similar in some respects. Does anybody here remember the Camelford water incident of 1988? Yeah, where the Camelford water supply in Cornwall was accidentally contaminated with pure aluminium sulfide, which is used as, I think, as a biocide, and it caused massive health problems in the area. And in fact, the reason I came to find out about it was because a guy introduced himself to me who had been campaigning to try and raise awareness of Camelford, because he absolutely believed that his wife's death in 1992 was directly related to her being affected by the contaminated water. The British government did not admit that there had been any problem at Camelford until 2011, 23 years later. And this is the way the establishment works. And when there's a problem, you push any kind of attempt to research it, to analyse it. If you know or feel that the research is not going to be what you want, then you do everything you can to make sure it doesn't happen. And that's the case very much with Bridgend. And let me tell you that if 5G is rolled out, then Bridgend is going to seem like an attractive proposition, because the potential is far more significant. So this is actually a report from 2007, not 17. And the media were at least asking the right questions, but it just wasn't enough. So here's the Sun. It's actually, I say, from 2007, not 17. Suicide is not something you can catch. The mystery behind the small Welsh town of Bridgend, where 23 men committed suicide in 1 year. And I said that there have been anecdotal reports that actually it hasn't or didn't stop in 2007. They just decided to draw a line under it. But over period from 2007 onwards, actually the number of suicides in the area is something in the region of mid-70s. We've got lockdown again. So the official number of suicides in the Spate with the Welsh Assembly classified as taking place over 2007, 2008 was 23. However, the deaths continued far beyond that time frame, and reports suggest that in the 5 years up to February 2012, 79 people took their lives in the wider county borough of Bridgend. How many of you were aware of that? Okay, a few.
Ian, I met the first child with a suicide, first student. I met his father. He's a locksmith in Premiershire.
And what does he think happened?
Well, he said something is funny going on, but they won't even inquire about
No.
it. We'll
Well,
investigate it.
yeah. Maybe sometimes if you're that close, maybe you don't want to know.
Yeah.
You know. So here's the acknowledgement of Barry Trower's study. There were rumours of internet suicide cults and pacts, and even a conspiracy theory that suggested young minds had been damaged by radio frequencies. See what I mean about weaponised vocabulary? So it's like anyone who's considering that there might be a link with radio frequencies, nah, it's just a conspiracy theory. Now, more recently, we've had a spate of suicides at Bristol University, and it's not just Bristol, because it's also been acknowledged that there's been a spate of suicides at York University. And there's a common denominator here. Bristol, it says there have now been 10 student deaths in a little over 18 months, a number of which have been confirmed as suicide. Bristol University is a 5G test area. And in fact, one of the officials of Bristol's National Union of Students was asking the right questions, i.e., what is the research into the study as to the proximity of where these students were staying on campus and the proximity of the 5G phone masts that had been installed as test bed. And he got run off. He was run out of his course, which meant that he lost his position in the National Union of Students because he was obviously asking the right question, but rather than have to address that question, let's just get him out, get him off the scene. So here was this was the 5G network running between July 17 and March 2018, and sadly, as you're going to see, there's other universities that are involved, but everyone's aware here, right, of the outrageous salaries that chancellors of universities are paying themselves. I mean, even a nondescript former technical college, which is now using the name university, their chancellors are earning in excess of £250,000 a year. Meanwhile, of course, student revenues are reducing because more and more students are realising that walking out of university at 21, 22 with anything between £30,000 and £50,000 worth of debt just isn't a viable proposition. So they're looking at other paths, and the universities are struggling for revenue. So what do? They're doing what happens in the US, which is turn to the corporations and say, how can we help? And in return for the appropriate funding, then basically they'll produce reports to say whatever it is that the corporation wants them to say. So this is from the Faculty of Engineering at Bristol University. A world-class 5G technology test network is aiming to put Britain at the forefront of the next wave of mobile technology, potentially adding up to 173 billion to the economy by 2030. Now you start to get the comprehension as to why the commerce takes priority here. 173 billion. And the attitude of the sociopaths in the corporatocracy is, if there's a little bit of collateral along the way, as long as it ain't me. And this is their attitude. So this is from a website, EMF Guru Consultancy. Student suicide clusters, is microwave radiation to blame? And as I've mentioned, Bristol, but then similarly, York University also had a suicide cluster of 5 students within 1 year period in 2016. A report by the university in May revealed that half of all ambulances called out to the University of York were for instances of self-harm or suicide attempts. The proportion of emergency calls of this kind has been growing year on year. The rising costs of higher education, the more difficult labour market post-graduation have been cited as to blame for the rising depression. So, you know, that's thrown in there as the likely cause to try to stave off any suggestion that there might be some link here with the 5G research that's been going on at York University. So this article goes on, says, here are a few questions any parent or student can ask university administrators. How far away is student accommodation to the main computer suites that house Wi-Fi transmitting and ancillary equipment? How far away are the Wi-Fi hotspot antennas in relation to accommodation buildings? And please ask administrators if they are aware that exposure to microwave radiation from 900 megahertz and upwards is biologically dangerous, because we now have clear evidence that exposure to microwave radiation induces rare brain tumours and heart cancers. So the questions are being put out there, and by the way, a lot of these people asking the questions are seeking the advice, guidance and counsel of Barry Trower. So, you know, this isn't something that is just being plucked out of thin air, as it were. Then we have the military issue, and we have this phenomena, which I'm sure every one of you is aware of, where our military personnel are experiencing levels of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, at a phenomenal rate. And many of those who are suffering from PTSD have never been anywhere near the front line. So it's not related to actual battlefield experiences, and there's an increasing acknowledgement that this is related to the technology that they are exposed to, i.e. battlefield interrogation technology. In other words, using microwave technology to effectively scan and then paint an electronic picture of what's on the battlefield. It's been acknowledged, as you'll see, since the 1970s from naval research conducted in the US that basically it's essential to limit someone's exposure to these frequencies. And in fact, just a few days ago, somebody contacted me who used to work at St George's Hospital in Tooting, and apparently there was a military base not too far away, which was the Royal Corps of Signals. And they said that back in the 70s, they couldn't work out why it was that they were dealing with so many cases of cancer amongst existing and former personnel who were in the Royal Corps of Signals. So, obviously, as technology advances, and as technology is able to provide more and more intelligence, then once again there's just the acceptance that if there is a spin-off impact and a few squaddies suffer from PTSD leading to self-harm or suicide, well, it's just collateral. It's very sad. This is the report which is freely available. You can find this on the web. So this is the Naval Medical Research Institute, and this is a report that was published in the 1970s, which clearly acknowledges that the US Navy were very, very aware of the negative health dangers associated with radio frequency and electromagnetic fields. Okay, I won't go into the detail here, but more than 2,300 references on the biological responses to radio frequency and microwave radiation published up to April 1972 are included in this bibliography of the world literature. Particular attention has been paid to the effects of on man of non-ionizing radiation at these frequencies. The citations are arranged blah, blah, blah. So if you want to the detail, it's all there. You know, everything I'm sharing with you is in the public domain. And as I'm sure many of you realise, the sociopaths that are rolling this out, they actually have a completely different belief system from us. And they actually believe that they have to put what they're intending to do, or what the effects of what they're doing, they have to put it out there. And then, you know, when we do nothing, that's effectively our acquiescence to just let them do it. So, you know, obviously we're dealing with a foe here that does not have the best interests of humanity at heart, But actually, what allows them to get away with it is our apathy, our collective apathy. And of course, still the